So breathing in once more. Coming into this beautiful moment. Oh, grounding, grounding, grounding with a deep breath in. And exhalation. Delicious. Thank you, thank you. And so we're actually going to change up our sermon slightly today. Normally we do peace and global events earlier on before our weekly song, but today we're actually going to be doing local peace and local events, and we're starting with Amber's song, and then I'll just slip right into the sermon right after. Sound good?
All right. So normally we pick something either locally or globally, and we kind of talk about how it ties into what we do. Obviously, though, yesterday provided a lot of fodder to talk about today. And so for those who either saw our post about it or are learning about it, we were doing an event at a local library, which went great. The talk went really well. We had an excellent turnout. We had a book signing after, and it was very joyous. But after, two gentlemen did approach us, and at first they were very kind and respectful. And then someone who was at the event heard them outside speaking about us in a very negative way. And so eventually one of them came back in. Fortunately, a few of you who were in the room stayed with us, so thank you for that. The library responded very well also, and the police were notified. And eventually Alaric realized that this person wasn't going to leave the room until they were spoken to. So Alaric went over and talked to them, and at first, again, very cordial and respectful. But then it turned into that this person did not believe in what we were doing. They talked about, because of Sodom and Gomorrah, that people like us should not be in town, and that we are preaching Satanist views, and that basically anything that was not Jesus was not peace, and that, quote, they would try to run us out of town. And again, at no point was their voice raised. At no point we were afraid for our physical safety, but it was just told to us. And then they left. And later on, the marshal spoke to both of them and then talked to us and was extremely helpful. And then even after that, we also met the town mayor for the first time. So unfortunate circumstances to meet the mayor, but he was lovely and gave his full support to us as well. And after we posted about it, just the outpouring of support from many of you in this room, but also people we have in Arizona in our old community, really has meant a lot to us. And it's an interesting correlation, because today's talk, going into living peace, was starting that ignorance is an illusion. And so we couldn't have planned that better, but it's easy to get caught up. One of the proudest moments, I think, actually, and I haven't told you this yet, but probably one of the proudest moments yet in our marriage was watching you yesterday, because after the two men left, at no moment did you show anger or any sort of frustration. You only had compassion. You just said, I really do feel for these two men, because in their mind, this is their purpose in life. And it's not our place to judge it as right, wrong, good, bad, not to hate them, not to feel angry towards them, but just to honor their headspace that they are in. And from our standpoint, the only question we can ask is that bringing peace into the world or not? Right. And so I was very proud of that, because you really embodied this tenet, understanding that, as we're going to go into it, and I don't want to steal too much from you, but that ignorance is a chosen state of mind. And again, that word ignorant, we obviously have a negative connotation to it if you say someone's ignorant. But again, with going into what we talk about, which is a lot of non-duality, it's not right, it's not wrong. It's just more about, is a mind and a heart being open or closed? Are they connected or separate? And so seeing yesterday an example of separateness, it's just sort of a wake-up call to us, but it reminds us why we do the work. So
absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole?
So I was the first person to leave your talk yesterday. I'm usually the first person to get out the door because I've got somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And that one of those gentlemen came right up to me and said, "Why will you show up to this and not show up for Jesus?" And I looked at him and I said, "How do you know that I'm not showing up for Jesus?" And I walked away.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's really, really powerful.
And I wouldn't have said jack shit about it, but you brought it up.
Yeah.
And I didn't see your post, and I kind of forgot about it. And
yeah. Thank you for sharing. And that's going to tie perfectly into this. Because again, it's the assumptions that we're making about other people. And in that moment, that was a huge assumption on his part towards you.
Big time.
And so let's breathe that in. And then we're going to make this into a beautiful transition. We're going to do a lot of learning together. Are you ready? And if you have feelings and opinions, get ready. I'm going to slash them all. It's funny, but it's true. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Anderson. I really appreciate it, going into that. And it definitely felt, it was interesting. It definitely was a mixture between us being a gay married couple and the homosexuality involved, and then also our unique take on spirituality that is not preferred by them. And it was interesting. So all of last night, all I could think about was literally, this is where my mind constantly kept going towards. All my mind kept thinking about was I couldn't help but honor the respect that they had for not interrupting us. Because not interrupting us. Because even when I was doing the book signing, one of them was just sitting there patiently waiting to talk to me. And I was signing the books, and he was overhearing all the positivity from all of us. And afterwards, it was very interesting that there was this almost like a disruption I could see in his mind, where he actually gave us a compliment, where it was like, I could see, a lot of people are into this and they really are enjoying it. But, that's only half the town. The other half are going to run you out of town. And even with those words that were meant to be harmful, I didn't feel them being harmful, because that's just not my mindset. I can understand his psychology. But again, I couldn't help but continue to focus on that, whether it was them or whether it was the space that we had created in love and in peace together, there was actually no disruption to it. There was disruption once you left, unfortunately. If you went out those doors, boom, they would come up to you. But in that moment, there was a power there, and there was a power of peace present. And so what I really enjoyed about that is that actually showed that this peace shit does work. And also, in hindsight, I don't know if you would have given me the opportunity, but had I had more energy, because we were just coming down off of a very energetic event. If I had more energy, I would have loved to just sit down with him and say, tell me your full opinion on this. Tell me your full opinion. I'm willing to listen to hear. And I have a history with this. I'm able to listen to hear without getting triggered. And then I would just bring it back to, what is that, everything you just shared with me, what does that feel like in here? What does that feel like? Let's not get in an argument about what's wrong, what's right, what's good, what's bad. I'm not even going to try to change your opinion. Not even going to try to change your opinion. Not going to try to justify us being homosexual married couple. No point in that. Not going to justify us teaching Zen. But tell me about you. Tell me about the peace you feel on a daily basis. And when you're coming into this moment, do you feel more adrenaline? Do you feel more peace? Do you feel more motivation? Do you feel more inspiration? And what that does is, again, it may not work in this situation, but this has worked for me a lot in the past of building bridges with people who have said similar things to me, not the running out of town part. But I mean, I've been persecuted for being gay very early on in life. And so I had to learn how to handle that. And so it was just very fascinating that when you look at it from that perception, rather than if I had taken it as a perception, well, fuck them. Think about that. Think of how many of you may have heard this or have read our post and instantly felt some opinion about it. Right? Right? It triggers an emotional response. And unfortunately, that emotional response generally is separation. Generally is judgment. And so here's the part where it might sting you a little bit, which I apologize in front, but I'm excited to do nonetheless. Here's the stinging part. And ignorance is not a bad word. It's not a wrong word. It just means not knowing. That's all that we're explaining it here. So their ignorance and not knowing triggered your ignorance and not knowing. Think about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. That instantly, when you read stuff like this happening, not only to us, but in the world in general, You develop an opinion about someone, and then you only make them that opinion. You don't even consider that there might be a bridge of connection that could be made. You don't even consider that there might be a bridge of connection that might be made, and we write individuals off as, well, that's just who they are. And we don't even attempt, we don't even try. Think of how often you may have done that to individuals or a group of people or a nation or a religion. A lot of you have been burned by religion in this room, which I'm sorry. But what's funny is that if you've been burned by certain religion, instantly what ends up happening is we start to judge the collective of that said religion or that said group. And obviously, we may never want to go into that direction again because we see the hypocrisy of it, but we can at least purify our own judgments about it and then gather in places like this where we are working on our own peace, if that makes sense. Isn't that juicy? Isn't that delicious? And so my invitation to all of us, of course, is if they happen to show up today or any other day, you know, that we don't get into an argument about them. Like my mom, you know, I call her up and I'm like, so guess what happened? You know, she's ready to, oh, if I was there. I'm like, no, but it's good you weren't here. Because that would then fuel anytime we act aggressively towards anyone that is in opposition to us, it fuels their justification. Can you hear that? It fuels their justification, and then they see, I was right all along. See, I was right all along because you're reacting in a negative way towards me, and that's not peace. And you preach peace. Oh. So, for those of you who enjoy, you know, what we're spreading here, what we're teaching here, I invite us to really use this as an opportunity. Use this as an opportunity to integrate, to really observe the way our ego has been triggered. And honestly, well, let me disclaim, obviously I appreciate all of the people ready to go to war for us. So thank you. But it's not necessary. And it's never necessary. Instead, I really want to help, and that's why we're here. I want to help to shift all our mindsets to go in a direction of, rather than reacting with separation, let's respond with unification. Let us respond with asking questions. Let us respond with compassionate listening. Because I tell you what, when you give someone a platform and you are completely, there's not an opinion within your body, and they are just allowed to talk to you and to spill all of their pain and all of their harm onto you, even if it's offensive, eventually they run out of things to say. I promise. Eventually they run out of things to say. And now they're empty. And the moment they become empty, their receptivity increases, maybe by only 1%, but it increases. And then you can have a dialogue. And as long as you're not trying to change their opinion, the dialogue actually can be one of connection. Because there's always things that we relate to one another. There are so many more things we have in common because we all suffer. We're all caught up in this impermanent world where things are constantly ebbing and flowing, dying and birthing. And so we all experience pain. And so, for example, I'm just making up a story right now, but it's an example. For example, maybe one of them has a child that's depressed or is suffering from suicidality, suicidal thoughts. That's something that I could actually help with. They may not want my help, but think about having a place like this and just say, okay, let go of the religion for a moment. Let go of the homosexuality for a moment. If I could save one life, if we together could help save one child's life from committing a next suicide, isn't that a connection point that we can all agree on? And the answer, of course, hopefully, would be yes. But generally, you see how we just forgot about all these other things that are differences, and then we came together on one thing that is in connection. And so that's why it's important for us to really start to develop a broader perspective of, again, why we don't really teach religion here. We don't teach dogma. What we teach is peace and pain. Peace, pain. Pain, peace. Peace, pain. Are you in pain? Are you in peace? And pain could be anything. It could be stress, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be physical pain, it could be mental pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. And are my words causing other people pain? Or am I actually in a lot of self-judgment causing myself pain? And then let's bring it back to peace. What is this direction? And again, I can't say in this situation that it might build a bridge or not, but I have had many experiences where it has in the past. And it was a beautiful, beautiful healing experience. When I was younger, I'd often befriend the people that hated me the most. And then the moment I befriended them, their hate disappeared. And the way I befriended them is because I just listened to them. And maybe I was the first person to ever listen to their full story in their life. And how healing is that? How healing is that? Does that make sense? And there's many stories about this. There was an African-American man who used to go around and collect KKK caps, because he would go into their chapters and talk to the head, and he would just have a conversation, because many of those men, part of the group, never met a black man before. And so he would befriend them. And I think he was the number one force that led to the dissolution of one of the biggest chapters. I can't remember what state, but he helped dissolve one of the biggest KKK chapters in America, because he would slowly but surely befriend one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, and putting himself, his life actually in danger, because he'd go into these armed rooms with these men that hate him. But they'd start to talk, and I might be misunderstanding this, but I think they made a connection through music.
Through what?
Music. And so isn't that cool? Isn't that cool that that exists? And then there's another story by Thich Nhat Hanh, who, again, I teach a lot about him. There's some books available over yonder if you're interested. But he's one of my main spiritual guides in this life. And I gain a lot of inspiration from him and his monastery and his monks. And you know, he was probably about a little, maybe my age or a little bit younger at the time when the Vietnam War was happening in his home country. And so he came over to the United States, and when he was speaking out against it there, not only to us, but also to the Vietnamese people, because they don't want the war either. And so he came to the United States and was going from church to church to church to church. Here, this, foreign man in robes talking to churches. It didn't always go that well. But for the most part, they were receptive. But there was this one big congregation he was talking to, and a man stood up and started shouting at him and saying, if you care about your people so much, why the hell are you here and not back in your home country taking care of them? Thich Nhat Hanh took long pauses of breaths right there. And surely, but slowly, he responded and said, if you're going to water a plant, you can't water the leaves. You have to water the roots. And the roots of this war are here in America. And so that's why I'm here, to help. And I want to be home. I want to be with my brothers and sisters. But I need to be here, and that's where I'm being called, to water the roots of this war. And then afterwards, he went outside, and the man who was recounting this story actually followed him, and he didn't understand, because Thich Nhat Hanh was hyperventilating. And he's like, he must be so emotional or wrecked about this, that this man challenged him, but actually he just breathed so deeply to ground himself that he started hyperventilating, because he was so triggered by that comment, because that was one of his core wounds of he did not like being away from his homeland and his people that were being killed, and even his own monks that were being ostracized by the Vietnamese government because they were speaking out against the war. So it was from both sides. No one was accepting them. And so he wanted to be there, but he knew he had to be here. And so in that moment, it would have been an easy moment to react. But what would that get him? It would prove that man right in his mind. And instead, he took those long, deep breaths, which I'm teaching y'all, right? That we're all learning here. And then he responded. It's kind of like PPR in Living Peace: pause, process, and respond. But that story always stuck with me. He breathed so deeply, he started hyperventilating. But it's a beautiful, beautiful story. And nonetheless, that is what is being invited for us to do. And I want to transition this and this experience that we just had here. And again, it almost may seem like that we're taking it lightly, but obviously we're not. We have we have safety here, and we have the deputy who's driving by and stuff, and making sure that you never know with people. You never know what could happen. But the moral of the story is that the opposite of reacting will only make it 1,000 times worse. Just think about that for a moment. Because if we got all caught up into this, we would not be able to really fully show up in peace today, would we? My sermon might be a little different, and it might go against our mission statement. And that's not why you're here. But the ego would love to hear that. Your ego would love to hear me justifying your separation, your separating thoughts. And a lot of religions, a lot of politics prey on that. They prey on the separation that you already feel, and then all they have to do is point a finger and say, that's the problem. That right there is the problem. They're the problem. And when that happens, further pain, further separation. And that is not where we're going. Does this make sense? And so now let me bring it more back into a practical sense on a day-to-day basis, which this example is a practical sense on a day-to-day basis, because guess what? This shows us that there's a lot left to do here in America on a very grassroots, fundamental basis level, a day-to-day basis, even within your own very homes, and how you're raising your children, and how you're responding to loved ones, how you're reacting to loved ones, how you're reacting to your children, how you're responding or reacting to friends, family, difficulties, etc. Because every reaction is a form of violence. Ooh, oh, whoa! Did you just say that? It maybe not in a big sense, but on a minuscule sense, when you react, how does that feel? You can feel that tension in your body. And guess what? That is violence to yourself. Let alone whatever happening or spilling onto whoever's around you. Right? And then they learn this behavior, and it just continues to accumulate and propagate. And it just spirals and spirals and spirals. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are evolving, and as I talk about in my book, Living Peace, we're evolving from Homo sapiens, which is wise men, wise humans, to Homo luminous. And I view it as an evolution of ego, that we don't need to keep creating society based off of the ego and separation. We can start creating society from a place of this transcendental viewpoint of not feeling threatened by everything and everyone, and not feeling the need to point fingers at everyone and everyone. And even when we feel like we're a good person, every single one of us in this room probably had a moment when you heard this story, or last night, or whenever, there might have been this moment where all of a sudden this happened. Oh. Right? Instantly, you're like, I don't want to talk to that person. I don't want to interact, or maybe I want to punch them, you want to stand up for these people you care about that were harmed. And it could be any situation. But instantly, this is the part of our being that it's important for us to learn how to transcend. Because this is the part on a fundamental level that keeps wars alive on the planet. Think about that for a moment. Because every war, every big conflict starts within the home, because it is a collective conscious choice. It is a collective conscious choice. A lot of times we'll even blame the few people in charge. But we play along with it, don't we? And we take the bait. We take the bait of judgment. We take the bait of blame. We take the bait of pointing fingers. And we say, if this wasn't here, then this wouldn't be a problem. But here's my favorite part of this whole experience, because Andrew and I could easily take to say, well, if that, yesterday we had a great day. We still had a great day. We could have even easily said, well, if that didn't happen, it would have been a great event. We still viewed it as a great event. Or maybe we would have lost sleep over it or something. But no. Instead, we viewed it as an opportunity to check our egos. Write that down. Hot damn nugget. Every opportunity that triggers you is an opportunity to check your ego. rather than feeling justified that you're a good person and you'd never do such a thing. Think about that. When you say shitty behavior from other people, it almost is like, well, I don't do that, so I'm pretty cool. It justifies, it validates your own sense of self-worth a lot of the times, because you would never do such a thing necessarily. But in that judgment, you're doing the exact same thing. You're just not going up to them and telling them. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And here's where we get Jesus-y for a moment. We'll just throw this in for y'all. Because I could teach Jesus as well, his teachings. You know, where they talk about sin, where it's like to think about sinning is just as bad as sinning. Obviously, I've never used those dualistic vocabulary, and I don't teach sin at all. But to think of judgment is the same as acting the judgment, because it's all energy and it's all vibration. And you know this to be true because if you're in a room with someone who's judging you, do you feel it? So therefore, it exists. And there is an energy that it is exuding forth from you. And that is why it's not enough to just check yourself daily and make sure you're not having negative thoughts, or you have a negative thought, you check it, you change it, negative thought, check it, you change it. Instead, we're learning how to just completely cease having negative thoughts. And again, that sounds impossible, but I promise it's not, because it all is based upon your belief system. If you believe in duality, if you believe in right and wrong, good and bad, your mind is always going to go in a judgmental direction. For example, I did not have a single judgmental thought towards those men at all yesterday because I don't have that belief system that there's anything wrong with them. Can you hear that? I don't believe that there's anything wrong or bad about them. I view that this is their own sense of purpose in life, and unfortunately, it's causing other people harm and it's causing themselves harm. But I don't need to get wrapped up into the judgment of it. And I can recognize that if we go in this direction, sure, it'd be more peaceful, but I'm not going to be the one that then falls out of my own alignment just so I have the opportunity to tell them that what they're doing is hurting people. Does that make sense? Granted, if we had a conversation, I'd mention, are you aware of these actions? But again, it's not coming from a place of this is bad, this is wrong. Because that is exactly what made you leave all of those relationships or religion in the past, because you felt judged. And now all of a sudden someone is in pain, and now we're feeling the need to judge them. And then that further perpetuates the separation, then further perpetuates their own contrast, and further perpetuates the violence. Make sense? Hard to hear, maybe. Even harder to do. Was that a hand?
Yes. Can I ask a question? So I think one of the things that's hard, like having that experience yesterday, what kept coming into my mind is, okay, you know, not really wanting to judge them, but not quite knowing what to replace it with. I mean, I had this sense of like, not quite knowing where to go with it in a lot of, you know, like I could write about it and read about it, but I still felt just kind of this uneasiness, this, like, what is really going on with me? What am I feeling? You know, like, and so if you could just talk, like when you're talking and having this discussion with people, how, I mean, just that sense of peace without feeling like you're missing something, or that there's still this hole or this space that you're not quite sure what to put in there if we're not putting our ego in there.
Let's breathe that in. Fantastic question. Thank you. So let's breathe that in. Let's take a moment. The word that comes to mind would be acceptance. And we may not all be able to get to that acceptance right away. But to recognize, and you may still feel that uneasiness, and recognize that feeling uneasy is not bad or wrong either. Mm-hmm. And so because instantly we may feel, oh, uneasy, that means something's still off. Or rather, okay, I'm choosing not to judge, or I'm choosing not to respond. But maybe that uneasiness is simply a natural byproduct of that there is the separation that's happening. And maybe it's not coming from me right now, but I'm feeling this disconnect. And rather than judging the disconnect, even when I don't judge the disconnect is still going to be there. And then accepting that the disconnect is there. and accepting them in their own belief systems for what is there, and still taking the measures. Like, for example, the cops would still have to be called, and then there still have to be a file on it because safety precautions have to be made. And I mean, it's not, it's never going to be like awesome to go and like, harass gay people, for being being married or teaching this stuff. I mean, obviously that is stuff we're still going to take measures to do. Peace is not about non-action. What I'm talking about is we still take all these actions, but we still rectify within our mind. How am I responding to it in my brain? Am I feeling justified in my judgments, or am I using these judgments that I'm having, or this fear, this anxiety, and looking at it and allowing it to teach me even more about my ego? Does that make sense? So I love that word, just that acceptance, but also being okay with the uneasiness.
Right.
Isn't that delicious? Isn't that delicious? Because when we feel uneasy, we instantly feel like there must be a problem. I now have to fix it and solve it and then make it go away. But sometimes it doesn't go away for a very long time. Yeah.
I was going to share too, because all this stuff is bringing up a lot for me, feeling like I think a big part for my own practice with my aspiration to find more peace is learning how to be comfortable feeling super uncomfortable and triggered, right? So when someone's really aggressive or non-cooperative or even, harmful or, deceptive or whatever, like learning how to be content, being aware that that's the case and feeling all the visceral reality of whatever, anything from the most mundane lowest level to like a serious threat, and just really realizing, like Alaric's saying, basically that the wisest way to respond is to take time and really process that and feel deeply and recognize how their hatred or ignorance or lashing out is inseparable from our own, and how in the past, reflecting on times when we haven't had this wisdom to rest with our afflictions and our own reactivity, how much more chaos spirals from our reactivity, and just learning to be at peace with our own unpeacefulness, right? Because of course, it's not going to feel good when someone's harmful or acting in an immature way or what have you. So, I just always try and remember for myself, like, their hatred is my hatred ultimately. Not that I have to take responsibility for theirs. Maybe like I was programmed in my childhood with Catholicism or anything else, and so it's a really fine balance too of like being present and aware, like, wow, I'm really triggered and upset right now, but not living from that, right?
Absolutely.
But acknowledging that's super important, I feel like. And I feel like in mainstream society, we've been taught to not acknowledge it when we're uncomfortable and just ignore it, throw it under the rug, we'll deal with it later. Much better to normalize it is a word that I've heard often that helps me always reconnect when I am really triggered or upset by something, is to just be with it till it normalizes and I can see clearly and be clearly with everyone,
Thank you so much for
our
sharing.
natural community. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Let's take a deep breath. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Let's go ahead and bring this all home. We were a little bit over time. Make it a couple sentences.
I was there yesterday, and I did not witness that confrontation. A few of us went to lunch afterwards, and we were just so very grateful that we had this here in our little town of Bayfield. Did not see that, did not witness it. I felt nothing but namaste when I walked out of that library yesterday. So I'm disappointed. I suppose that we have people that are like that. I hope that they were not threatening to you. I hope you don't feel threatened. But everybody needs to be on guard when it comes to people who believe like that. And it just makes me sad that in this little community of Bayfield, we have people like that who believe that. And
so let's breathe that in real quick. I appreciate your acknowledgement. I'm so happy to hear that you had such a joyous time yesterday. And that's the beautiful thing about this work, is that even amidst all of these things, there's still joy, there's still peace, and there's still connection. And for those of you who may feel upset or sad or any type of emotion about this, I'm giving you, it's not my place, but I'm giving you permission to not feel that way. Because it's not,
hard not
it is hard not to. I know, we understand that it's hard not to. But it is okay not to go in that direction. And it's not your burden to bear or your burden to carry. Because often when we get wrapped up into sadness or grief or frustration or impatience with situations like that, often what that does We didn't really get to talk about it today. I'm sorry I did not go through this. I apologize. But it's like, we're gonna talk about this next week, but it's the vibrational aura, and that every thought, every action, every word, every feeling is part of this vibration. And when we get overly empathetic with situations, and again, I feel the love, we feel the love, and we are so grateful for that. But we also don't want you to lower your vibration because of situations like that. If every time you turn on the news and you lower your vibration, you're like, oh God, no. Then what happens is that it actually ends up keeping us caught up in those same cycles. Isn't that interesting? And again, take it or leave it. But does that make a little bit of sense? It can be challenging to do. It can be so challenging to do. And I teach my mama this every single day because, boy, howdy, she cares about her child. But every time that something goes south, we're sorry, South. We use this and we don't mean to offend you. But every time something goes south, she feels for me. And then when she feels for me, she actually loses her emotional balance a little bit. And so then it just perpetuates this continuous emotional imbalance. And then here you see these modern monks that are just still jolly and happy and just continuing the work. Peace, man. And it happened to us. And yet we are the most peaceful about this whole situation. And it happened to us. So everyone around us is having a larger emotional reaction. Yeah. Isn't that cool though? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was so physically affected by this, and I'm glad we had this talk.
Yes.
I was angry. I'm still angry. I'm trying to process.
And that's why we're here. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close up, then we'll continue. But let's go ahead and wrap this up because this video is turning out to be pretty long. But it is going to be a juicy video to look back on. You can share it with your friends or whatever, Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So let me see if I'm going to share one thing. Okay, I'm just going to share this one little quote from Living Peace, and then we'll wrap up this video, and then if there's any more comments, we can go ahead and go into it. The closing of doors is what I call ignorance. Ignorance is often simply defined as, quote, not knowing. However, as used herein, it is a willful state, the choice to close our hearts and minds to the greater freedom of possibility. If we constantly keep ourselves open, then the shackles of ignorance will never restrain us. Deep breath. What is asked of us is to walk through life with an agnostic mind, accepting our limited perception with humbleness and never forming opinions on what's unknown. And as for what is known, we must always be willing to change our opinion when new information presents itself. Nothing is ever set in stone. We vow to seek understanding in all areas of life, including those areas that make us uncomfortable. Deep breath. Thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and look at the camera for a few moments, and then we'll resume back. And thank you for everyone who's watching our video and stuck with us. This was a very deep and delicious conversation. I hope you all gained some inspiration from it. And even if not, that's okay too. There's no expectation. And for anyone interested, you can browse our website. Our link is down below for Zen sessions that we do, or join us whenever. Every Sunday we're here at 1 o'clock. So if you're ever in the area in Bayfield, Colorado, you're welcome to join us. And then there's also a link if you're willing to donate to our vision and mission. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and blessed be.